The next presidential election could be about specifically this. I'm going to talk about Elon Musk wanting to talk about Occupy Mars and monetizing, or I'm sorry, codifying the learning process, right? I want to talk about Alex Karp, CEO of Palantir. He is talking about our Oppenheimer moment, the creation of AI weapons, and how I've got some specific strategies here in terms of how you create an AI threats detection grid. But it's going to be very much the same model where you're looking at pieces of infrastructure in different categories, and you're because in that particular instance you're looking at Jira and platforms, code archiving platforms, the likes of which, such as GitHub, and you're looking at building code change architectures with verified identities and assigning threats levels to code based upon algorithms involved. And that's a whole nother set of things, but it's all going to involve this protected libraries architecture. And you have to organize for major market verticals. You have to organize in different ways to make that possible. This probably isn't all of the pieces, but in some cases, you're talking about storing all kinds of data. You're talking about building the very high volume fetch and retrieval system. You're talking about ways of building security such that if you're generally just a consumer building an app and all of the everything's happening on the device, right? It's accessing the data and it's all happening on the device. I put automated navigation systems here because there are some central layers where data is going to have to tie together between systems. And so again, you're talking about building central architectures in the way data is utilized in protected libraries, and having this architecture where you're building a cyber force and you are analyzing the way data is looked at. And generally, if data is just accessed on an app and it's not connected to anything, as long as doesn't have any control algorithms associated with it, that's not a very dangerous algorithm. But potentially if it's using that for targeting, yeah, then maybe. So there are ways that you can look at the way data is being accessed by an app, and we can meet that moment. And again, this is part of what we need to talk about is how are we going to feather together that bid process. And so there's a company called Northwood Software that's into building some different concept mapping engines. There's going to be a way we can build this in 3D, and I talk about this a little bit in one of my presentations that I have put together. But generally what you're going to be doing is with data structures, you're going to be looking at the ways these tables are built, and it's going to collapse into a number of geometries, and then it's going to be able to allow us to build this really cool interactive incremental tree and concept mapping engine, such that when you're exploring issues, you'll be able to click on things, it'll bring things in context over here, you'll be able to make that collapsible, you'll be able to make this bottom menu collapsible. That's going to bring in more content. That's going to relate to this cool linked content quizability system where you can bring in more. Generally, if you want to start a grassroots campaign, I could go, and if this all existed, I'd be able to go to a university, talk about my approach with an associate professor there. It's going to create more demand for jobs in that sphere. This is one of the key pieces of democracy, is how we explore these bid processes. And so if you create more jobs here and more of an economy around this, it's going to make us more democratic, therefore, because you're creating more democratic markets or more opportunities for markets that support democracy to thrive. And so this is one of the key aspects to how democracy functions, is looking at the bid process. And so if you can look at that as an incremental tree and you compete, now we have this idea. And so social media, this could be what the next presidential election is about, because major market, because of the way this all comes together, the major market players such as Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or X.com, and I say Quora and Reddit, they would all race to implement this general architecture because it's a voice of our people. You can have this sliding equity scale system such that when these things are implemented and you have each of these core infrastructures where there's overlap and there's this accounting value, You drive the overall objectives. So strategic pivot, here's this business with these objectives outlined in this presentation, and it's trying to build this product in this way of making democracy more interactive and helping us to explore this bid process. Simultaneously, if you organize the right way with the education industry, you can build these cool incremental trees using the same technology that I talk about in this general layer, where we're talking about these incremental trees as they relate to psychology here in this presentation, but they also, the same technology is useful for education, and that's also how it relates here. It would help you without the education system building learning maps, general learning maps. You can do strategic pivot on its own, and you just build the market for these associate professors and teaching assistants, who universities can now hire more of because they can potentially pay them a little bit less, but there's more of this market to earn more money through supporting the university in these other endeavors. So potentially you have some low paid, but then they qualify through the university's employee badging system, and that's going to be maybe one of the requirements is to be an employee of a university in order to make one of these quizzes. So there's going to be a validation system for that. And so that would be one of the requirements, is you have to be a university professor in order to build, or associate professor. And maybe there are ways that Khan Academy can get sponsored by a university because they create a lot of relative content. And so there are ways you can open that marketplace further. But if you have this general goal, you can codify the learning process, as somebody like Elon Musk has said, and you can bring content in focus for the bidding process, which is there's a need for that. This whole presentation about getting more people in the room and how you build effective regulation, it aired on C-SPAN on April 15th, is about all of these things. So again, we have Alex Karp. How do you organize to effectively be prepared for an AI age? Again, you're going to have pieces like this. You're going to need these feathered together library structures. You're going to need these major market verticals. You're going to want to organize for that. And these are just some ideas of companies that do some things in the legal sphere. There's Reeve Elsevier. Forward wants to change the medical sphere. 100 wants to change some things in the education sphere. They're all relevant players that could help to launch these sorts of advanced platforms where you have these sliding equity layers. Basically, in each of the major verticals, you have core infrastructure that powers those verticals. If you're only locally accessing the data, it's a less dangerous app. If it's just locally accessing medical records on an app, it's a less dangerous app. If it's pulling records out, that's more dangerous. But generally, if you're a clinician, you might be accessing it with your identity. If you're a consumer, you might be accessing it with your identity. But if it's just doing stuff with access, that's going to be, or updating access if you have credentials for it, as in you're a clinician, then that's going to be less dangerous than if it's pulling like GPS data onto a device locally and it's doing more than just accessing that data. It's trying, you could detect that algorithmically, but you're going to want to organize with these types of protected libraries, and you're going to want to feather them together from core operating system levels and protected library partitions into major market verticals, and how point of sale systems and warehouse management systems control advanced transaction systems. I'm going to say that all comes down to really something called an active plate system. There are things you want to do with biometrics and device authentication, but at all of these conversations, if you have advanced ideas there's no way to interact with it. And so I talk about there being a records access system as a core infrastructure, and then an active plate system as a core infrastructure. And that's something I could go into more detail in an interview, but I'm trying to keep this 10 minutes, which I'm getting to now. But this could be what the next presidential election is all about. The social media is racing to perfect this general architecture with this general set of systems with these two collapsible menus, and then you can explore content in very, very sophisticated ways. And I talk about how parent brands and joint operated subsidiaries, that's basically a path to things that could end the war in Ukraine. And so I really do think that there's a way, if the right person gets this, they could negotiate with Vladimir Putin to end the war in Ukraine based upon the recognition of protecting some of these different private sector layers and how these dynamics work. There's a way this can be used as a peace negotiation strategy. It's very complex, but it is true that there are dynamics involved that Vladimir Putin would definitely say they trust the leadership of the modern age more because they trust lasting institutions and they want to help pivot from existing institutions into new leadership of the future, not oust things and shake up the leadership and just try to figure out what's going on. That's one of the concerns that's had. And so if you come up with more practical ways of helping to pivot and you talk about that being a priority as you find when and where that's a necessity in a government structure, as in this example, there's a huge opportunity to make peace there. And simultaneously, if you're talking about splitting infrastructure and there are ways you can come up with these complex equity sharing agreements, again, there are pathways to potential systems. And again, if you think about this launching and to pay off the national debt, it's seriously achievable because the way the social medias will hugely grow in value through this set of initiatives. They'll probably all double in value. That's probably $3 trillion doubled to $6 trillion right there, and that's without any real growth factored in. And so, if you factor in a model like this, that could easily be something more like $10 trillion. Okay, and half of that might be coming from this model in that case, because that's what's going to help them to grow to that 10 or 20 trillion dollar market valuation, is this kind of very complex sliding equity system and working together to launch infrastructure more like this, more like a model like this. And because of that significance in world peace, you could get somebody like Vladimir Putin to want to work with you on this. And you could get the Trumps, because this is, again, racing to implement this infrastructure now. If Facebook or Twitter or Quora or LinkedIn or Reddit approached me, I would want to work with one of them for sure. Just because whoever came to me first, I would say, yeah. Maybe I would say, let's see what else I can put together, because I've put together a lot now in terms of a user interface, in terms of launch strategies. I could probably lead a division of a company. And so I would negotiate for that very, very strongly. And you could see this cool feature like you have happen in The Apprentice, where Donald Trump is like, this kid is really cool. We're going to help talk about his story, and we're going to champion that in what it adds to the American society. And you can see this as a frequent part of what we want to do as succeeding as a government of the people, right? And so this could be huge for the next presidential election. You think about this race for this product to be perfected over the course of the next presidential cycle, and then the next president gets elected and maybe they contract with The Apprentice. Maybe they buy that name, because this is going to drive up the name for the value for the name of The Apprentice, but you can grandfather in for a generation or so that the Trump Tower, the Trump family name, they get to contract into The Apprentice brand as they historically did originally when the brand was originally contracted, just to continue to market their name and help grow their brand. That's fair for what they added to society there. That's where I'm getting the inspiration, largely part of the inspiration from. And so that's right to do that. That's what people want to see in effective leadership, is these stories being passed off like this. And the leadership, the bravo, sort of good job. You contributed something valuable there. Congratulations. You deserve some recognition for that. That's what they want to see. And so that's what that's about there. And it doesn't have to be just about competing to get the best job at Trump Tower. It can be about competing to see who adds the most to the future of our society. And in all these pivots with green energy or the climate, you want to be showcasing our strides forward. That's part of how you help with the transition. In conclusion, this is the most significant thing the presidential election could be about. Thank you for your time.